Jy luister na RSG Geldsaake met Moneyweb potgoeie met gasheer Ryk van die Kerk. Besoek RSG Geldsaake se Facebookblad en kom ons gesels.
Ek het gisteraand met Estienne de Klerk van die eiendomsgroep Growthpoint gesels oor die ooreenkoms wat hulle met Etana gesluit het om elektrisiteit van verskeie hernubare kragaanlegte te koop. Nou, een van die aanlegte wat deel van die projek vorm is 'n hidro-aanleg in die Asrivier. Nou, dit is die rivier in die Vrystaat waar die water wat Suid-Afrika van die Lesotho Hoogland waterskema ontvang inloop en die water vloei dan later in die Vaalrivier in. Die hidro-aanleg word deur hidro-energie gebou en as dit eers voltooi is, sal dit hulle 4de projek in die Asrivier wees. Op die lyn is Stafford Harris, hy is die besturende direkteur van hidro-energie. Stafford, thank you so much for your time. We have spoken a lot about renewable energy on this show, but we have mainly focused on wind and solar technologies. Hydro plants have not been frequently mentioned as a significant option to generate electricity in South Africa. First of all, tell us about the hydropower industry in South Africa. How significant is it?
Obviously, we're a water-scarce country in South Africa, so we predominantly don't have large-scale hydro projects. There is some older projects that were developed and owned by Eskom, but in the private sector, there's very little existing hydro projects other than our projects. There's some projects up north towards the Orange River system, but what makes our project unique, as well as our existing projects, is it's on the Lesotho Highlands Water Transfer Scheme, which is between intergovernment treaty between South Africa and Lesotho, and there's a 780 million cubic of water release per calendar year. So effectively our plants on this river system is what we refer to as firm load or base load, meaning generation is effectively 24/7, 365.
But tell us exactly how it works and what such a plant looks like. Because as you've said, there are not many of these plants. I think I've counted 5, Angola and Drakensberg in KZN, Palmit in the Western Cape, and then there are 2 at the Gariep and Van der Kloof dams. But just give us maybe a description of how these plants look and how big a construction project it is.
So effectively, there's reference made to pumped storage versus run-of-river hydroelectricity, which these projects are run-of-river. Obviously not perennial river systems, which means we are reliant on seasonal rainfall. But this project is effectively a 5 megawatt project. It's a Kaplan turbine interconnected directly into the Eskom grid. Our capex cost for this project is around 360 million, so 72 million per megawatt. And we are constructing it on a full EPCM contracting strategy. Because it's a firm load project, its annual generation is around 30 gigawatt hours per annum, which is 30,000 megawatt hours. We typically work with trusted construction companies. So we would invest and then we would have EPCM contracts in construction and then we would own and operate the plant. Just in terms of generation, effectively on the current release schedule between Lesotho and South Africa, it's 780 million cubics per calendar year, but that will be increased with phase 2. So our existing projections of 30,000 megawatt hours will increase to around 40,000 megawatt hours as the release schedule from Lesotho to South Africa increases. But we are not a pumped storage, and we're effectively a low head site, head meaning the drop in terms of where the water is moving down the river system. So we're a low head site, which kind of dictates the kind of technology we have to use. We are bringing these turbines in from Germany, a company called Andritz Hydro, which is the same technology we used in our REAP project known as Stortemelk Hydro.
Yeah, pump storage is totally different. That is where you actually pump water into a dam and then when there's a peak demand, the water is released to turn the turbines. You've said around 72 million rand investment will give you around 1 megawatt of power. How does that compare to traditional wind and solar plants?
It's very different. Hydro is capital intensive, a lot of concrete infrastructure and mechanical parts, but we're on a smaller footprint than wind and solar. More comparable to wind, but effectively we have one turbine where wind, anything, can be from 10 to 100 masts, which is a turbine for each mast. So difficult to compare it in terms of technology and cost per megawatt. Obviously solar is your cheapest form of renewable electricity at the moment. Solar with batteries pushes up your price per kilowatt hour significantly. But then effectively we are high capex per megawatt, but we are 24/7, 365. So we effectively would run the same as a gas-fired plant or a coal-fired plant, except that we're fully green.
So it's a type of baseload technology as opposed to wind and solar, which are dependent on the wind blowing and the sun shining.
Correct. And obviously with solar, it's peaking at potentially times when you are not in need of it. But still, the energy mix needs to be diversified between these three technologies as well as existing old infrastructure. But it's definitely steps in the right direction, and it's been really great to work with the team at Growthpoint and Etana. They appreciate the technology and the amount of electricity that we can produce consistently.
How big is the potential for hydro plants in South Africa? Are there other rivers, for example, where this can also be done?
There are other rivers. So what's unique about these projects is obviously it's on a man-managed water transfer scheme. There's effectively 2 years of water storage behind your plant in Lesotho, which is the Katsi and Mahale dam system. Further on in South Africa, there is potential in KwaZulu-Natal. There's no grid constraints down there, given the fact that there's not a lot of IPPs that have been constructed and built there. So grid capacity is great. Being a water-scarce country, I think pump storage is more a sector to be looking at in South Africa, as we would need more water storage. But there is not a lot of huge potential to run 24/7 hydro projects. It would be full perennial systems where you effectively are generating when there's rainfall and water flow.
You have 4 of these hydro plants in the Ash River. Does it affect the flow of the river at all?
No, so we have no impact on flow release. We simply divert the water through our turbines and put the exact same amount of water back in. If anything, it dissipates the energy from the flow release, which would result in less erosion around the banks of private agricultural properties. But we don't have any impact on the flow release.
Stafford, baie dankie vir jou tyd vanaand. Dit was Stafford Harris, hy is die besturende direkteur van Serengeti Energy.
Jy het geluister na RSG Geldsaake met Moneyweb potgoeie elke weeksdag om 7 namiddag. Vir meer Moneyweb potgoeie, besoek moneyweb.co.za of laai die toepassing af en volg Moneyweb News om dagliks op hoogte te bly.